Hello, welcome back to the channel. This is part 2 of this mini-series, which I choose to call, what did I choose to call? Creating an animation. That's somewhat generic. Well, in the last video we focused on creating this background, which you see here in Cinema 4D. And as promised, this one will be about animating the character. So if you haven't seen the previous video, maybe give that a watch. You don't necessarily have to, you can also stay here with me and keep watching this video. As you can see here, I'm already at it. I'm drawing the first pass of the animation here. As I've said in previous videos, not the previous video, but videos before this, when you start out like this, you keep it very loose. Get a feel for, how the motion is and how your subject moves. Perhaps don't go into design straight away. I think that's a good tip to start with. Keep it really loose, because then you can change things quite fast. Don't be afraid to try that. Even though this looks quite complex at start, don't be afraid to try it. Break everything down into sections and take things one step at a time. It doesn't have to look pretty straight away, and I think that's what I said before, where keeping it loose is good. Like, even though it looks a bit crap, you want to get a feel for how your character moves rather than like what your character looks like at this stage. So if you're an illustrator, or at least into illustration in some way, which I assume a lot of you are, that of course makes things a little easier, because especially like when doing this type of animation, drawing characters and stuff, because you probably have a lot of understanding of anatomy and all that, so drawing a character in many poses might not be super hard for you. But I would say, even if you're not a confident illustrator, I'd still give this a try. It's a great way to learn to draw, actually, because you end up going through a lot of mileage in terms of drawing when making something like this. You'll have to study how the body moves, and you also draw the same subject like over and over. And the only way to get better at things is to work on it and put in the time. You really get to draw a character in different angles and perspectives. And it also, it kind of takes you out of a comfort zone. Maybe you normally only draw heads or like frontal views. Here you're gonna have to fit your character into this space you've built. And if you were given a pen and paper and asked to draw a character, maybe this isn't what you would end up drawing. It might have been some kind of static pose rather, So I think it's a good exercise. Some technical bits here. I'm drawing on video layers, and my timeline frame rate is set to 12 FPS. Got onion skin on, which you can see this little sort of ghosting from the previous frame. I'd say that's really important to have here. Like, onion skinning is very important, because you wouldn't know, you have to know what happened before to be able to draw the next frame, right? So you can see, like, when the foot goes down and stuff, like, where that was in the previous frame as well. It's quite useful. I had a bit of a plan before I did this, so it's good to, I'd say, plan it out before. You just don't draw straight up without an idea. So maybe at this point I knew what I wanted my character to do. I didn't really know if it was a male or a female at this point. I think I just knew I wanted the character to run out from this little side street and then run straight towards the camera, right? Or like slide first and then run up towards the camera. There are no real shortcuts in this kind of animation. What you can do to make things easier, if you don't know how to like pose this thing, maybe you act it out first and analyze your own movement. You can also film yourself or a friend or something do the move, so you have a reference point. That could be very useful. You can also film like a person and then, you know, put it on low opacity over here and, you know, match up the frame with what you filmed, and draw on top of that if you want like realistic movements. Like that's a good idea. You can also 3D animate your character maybe and draw on top of that. But you know, when you import like a video or something you already made, then you kind of restricted to that motion. Maybe you're happy with that, and that's good. You could do that. But I quite like drawing out of imagination, because you get these little, you know, like not mistakes, but you know, things aren't the same for every frame. If you drew on top of footage, you get it pretty accurate to what the real life is, and that's quite a rigid body, so that could sort of limit you in the end. At least I think so. So here I'm in After Effects now, and I just import the Photoshop file as just footage. You set it to footage when you import it, and then it will have the animation settings within it, so it will move like a film file, right? And I just wanted to create like the camera movement in here. So what I'm doing is I'm animating the scale and position. So you can see here I'm going to the last frame and putting in some scale keyframes here, and I'm moving it from 150 back to yeah, like, well, I mean, this will be different for your scene, but yeah, you can like zoom on it and move the canvas around, right? So doing some position keyframes, add an easy ease. And there you go. So back in Photoshop. So now you can see that I've started to animate the explosion behind the character, and like same principle here, like start rough and then build it up. When drawing effects, something that is quite useful, like, you know, like smoke or explosions or fire or whatever, something I think it's quite useful is to divide the whole thing into parts and animate them one part at a time. So don't treat the whole smoke cloud as one object where you try to memorize where everything goes, because yeah, that would be quite hard, I think. So focus on one like puff of smoke. Let's say one of these smoke puffs goes in one direction, you follow along and just focus on that for a few frames forward, and then you can go back and do the same for another bit. And that gradually creates this sort of smooth motion throughout. Once I have something I'm sort of happy with, I lower the opacity of that layer, I create a new video layer on top of it, and I draw a cleaner version of the same thing. So you just do iterations of this, of like, you know, a better version of what you just drew, and then another one. It's very time consuming, this, but like it pays off in the end, right? I keep the character and the smoke layer on different layers. You know, it's better to have a few extra layers than you know, bake everything together, because if you want to offset, let's say, one of the elements, yeah, you can have them on different layers and just offset it easy. If they were on the same, you would have to copy it out and all that. So yeah, keep things on separate layers for now. Then I do the same for the character. This is where I can start to throw in some design and take decisions on how my character is dressed and so on. Here I decided that it was going to be a female, and I also altered some of the poses from certain frames that I'd drawn below. So by doing several passes like this, you can refine your movement and see what works and what doesn't. I made sure that the hair had some kind of squash and stretch to it, so that when she runs and slides, it is sort of left. The hair is left behind a few frames, and then it catches up as she breaks and turns. Right. So all those things helps to drive the motion and make it more pleasant to watch. Then again, on a new video layer that I put under the outline layer, I fill in the character. I do this with just like a base color to get the full silhouette. So it can be any color really. You can start to color your character at this stage. If you knew your final colors for it, you could just paint it on the same layer. But I feel like it's quite useful to have a base layer that I can then use as a mask for my colors. So you could add once you've painted this gray or whatever throughout, you can add a new video layer on top of that and set it to be a clipping mask of this base color layer. And on that clipping mask you can draw, your skin tones, your clothes, your hair, whatever. Because then it'd be easier to try out colors, because you couldn't, with the clipping mask enabled, you can't go outside the character's borders or outside the silhouette. So it's quite easy to just test out different colors that way. But there are many ways to go about this, so that's just one way. You could also just draw on the same first layer, just paint in all your colors. What I did here at the end is to colorize my layer with a hue and saturation adjustment layer that I also set as a clipping mask of this base color, just to add some color to it. And I also thought it was a nice little effect to add some kind of shadow effect on top of it. So I did a duplicate of the color layer, and I put that as a clipping mask of the other color of the same color layer. And then I just offsetted it, so it just sort of, it's still within the same silhouette, but it sort of cuts off on the side, so it adds that sort of shadow effect on it. If this was for a final piece, I would probably animate my shading separately on a new layer, but I wanted a quick result that kind of looked a bit work in progress, so I thought that did the job. Right, so this is pretty much finished here. And yeah, I really enjoyed making this. So if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Follow me on Instagram, and yeah, I'll see you in the next one.